Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the national championship game. Honestly, if you want to look at this, right, this was an 8.5 point spread going into the game. This was one of the more entertaining national championship games in recent memory. Aside from that Alabama Georgia game that I got out of hand in the last couple minutes of the game, in terms of competitiveness, like when was the last time like we had a one possession game with 2 minutes left to go in the game?
We really haven't. Yeah, like you said, that Georgia Bama game got out of hand late. The score made it look worse than it was. That was a very competitive game all throughout. And then, yeah, you go back to 2020. That was it was a close-ish game, but Bama was really controlling most of that game. 2020, 2019, you had LSU, and obviously Joe Burrow do their thing. 2018, I believe that's Alabama and Clemson. And
That
Clemson
game got out of
throttled
hand
them.
fast. Yep.
Yeah, and then the year before that, that would have probably been the Georgia Bama game with the Tua coming in. That was a
Yep.
great game. So yeah, like it's not every time that we have these massive games. Like it's actually a good game. And yes, that first half got out of hand. I mean, Ohio State had four straight drives. They opened the game with touchdowns, right? And if you do that, you're gonna put yourself in a great chance to win. Their first three in the first half were just surgical 10 plus play drives going 70 plus yards on every single one of them. And they were rolling. You got to give them a ton of credit. We talk about when talent and coaching and, absolute culture and mentality, like when they all gel, like this is exactly what it looks like. You got to give hats off to Notre Dame, though, for playing it. They were down. They were sure-handed, right? I tweeted out, like, right when the game ended, I was like, damn, man, we really missed a Benjamin Morrison, Jeremiah Smith, like absolute masterclass. Because I do think if Notre Dame is like fully healthy, and Ohio State, to their credit, they battled injuries on the offensive line as well too. So it's not like they didn't have to go through a full season like Notre Dame did as well. But it is a shame in some of those aspects. But yeah, Ohio State was best team. We talked about it, like the most talented team. When they played to their level, like they did all throughout the playoffs, they were going to win, and they did. And like it or not, an 8 and a 7 seed played each other in the national title game, and these were probably the two best teams in the country, right? I think they show that. Maybe Texas is in there, right? Maybe Oregon if they didn't play an off game against Ohio State, but I think it's pretty valid. I'm happy for these two coaches, happy for these two fan bases. It was awesome. It was really awesome. You saw a bunch of stars. You're going to see a lot of those guys be playing on Sunday, right? So we're going to get into our NFL draft stuff later in March and April, and I'm sure we'll talk about playing these guys and these teams. But yeah, it was spectacular. You said it. I mean, it was actually a competitive game in the second half. Notre Dame, right? You gotta. I mean, again, like outmanned, right? Down a lot of points, playing not your style football. Leonard looked hurt, right? A bunch of guys banged up, and they just fought through, and it was really, really impressive.
Gutsy from Riley Leonard. Gutsy. He played awesome.
17 carries. He had like 8 in that first half or that
Yeah.
first drive.
Well,
It,
you know who also had 16, 17 carries on the other side of the field? We talked about this in the preseason. If you go back, right, if you go way back to our preview of the Ohio State team, we said this is probably Georgia, Ohio State 1A, 1B, right, most talented teams in the country. This team is talented to win with Will Howard at quarterback. But what will be interesting to see is if Ohio State decides to use Will Howard in the run game, okay, and they didn't all year, they saved it for this game. All right, they used Will Howard spectacularly. I thought he's a guy who's mobile, he's big, just like Riley Leonard. Notre Dame went down, marched down the field, used Riley Leonard plenty of times in the run game, and then Ohio State flipped that around and said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we kind of have a giant quarterback also who's pretty athletic, and we're going to use him in the run game actually more effectively than you did." And I thought that was really impressive from Chip Kelly and the offensive staff there. I was also impressed with Jim Knowles and Ohio State defense responding after that first drive, right? Because I watched that drive, and I don't know about you, CD, but I was like, that was awesome. That first drive when Notre Dame came out and punched them in the mouth, I was like, that was a championship drive right there. Now, it didn't turn into necessarily a win, but holy cow, I was impressed with that. And then I was impressed, like I said, with the response from Ohio State. And by the way, how many people on Twitter are going to be bozos, right? We said this from the beginning. Will Howard is a good enough quarterback to win a national championship. From the beginning. If he does not shoot up draft boards, then I don't know what we're doing, man. I don't know who's evaluating this player, and why he gets the disrespect that he does, but he was nothing but fantastic the entire season. He's what, like fifth all time in single season touchdowns for Ohio State, passing touchdowns. That's for the amount of quarterbacks that they've had there that have been electric. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. He's like top five in like passing yards in a single season as well. He was great this year. He was great. All right, enough
He
slander.
he was, and we've been defending him. I feel like for a while now, even back in his worst games, like against Oregon, where he actually played a fantastic game. We were like, yeah, he played a great game. He made one big mistake. Guess what? He's probably not going to do that again, and he didn't. Other than that Michigan game, which we think he was probably banged up, he was flawless. He was absolutely flawless. He was exactly what they asked him to do, and then some. I will say too, and you've heard a lot of people talk about it, and I want to credit Ryan Day and his staff and maybe his recruiting staff and his NIL budget, whatever. Like they did such a good job of not load management, but like preparing to play a 16 game season, right? In terms of like how you used Will Howard in the run game in the regular season, much different than how you used him in the postseason. Going out and getting a guy like Quinshon Judkins and seeing the value that he brings to your team, right? We saw him had a huge game against Texas, the huge big run against Notre Dame, right? Being able to spell and keep Henderson healthy and fresh, which he hasn't really been his whole career. It seems like going out and adding depth at the receiver position. That's why you recruit these 5 stars year in and year out. The offensive line, right? And being physical up front and getting down to your second string guys and still being able to produce. And then obviously on the defense side of the ball, you stayed relatively healthy, I thought, other than Denzel Burke battled some injuries. But other than that, I mean, I thought you.
Tumaloa was banged up as well in that game.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like in terms of the full
Yeah,
season, like
right.
keeping guys fresh to be able to play a 16 game and peak at the right time, they did it absolutely right. And I wonder if we see teams as hard as this to stack talent in college football these days, but you've got some programs that have the ability to do it still, right? We saw Ohio State do it, right? Georgia, Texas, Oregon, right? Are these programs going to start maybe following that kind of blueprint? Like, yeah, this kind of work because you're gonna have to play 16 games, 17 games if you make it to the conference championship, which Ohio State didn't have to do. But yeah, it was awesome. It was a masterclass. I do think too in terms of like, yes, Notre Dame that first drive was awesome, but I just wondered like Jadarian Price had 3 carries, Jeremiah Love had 4 carries. I know it wasn't like super effective when you did give them the ball, but I have to think that that was not in the game plan. And I know it
No,
changes because you get down early and you're playing from behind, but to me, like I just can't help but wonder again, like if Jeremiah Love was healthy and how special a player he is when he comes back this year for Notre Dame, like he's going to be right at the top of the best running backs in college football, right? Especially with Genty and Scadaboo and other guys going. Uh, he, he would be a focal point on that offense. He could be a difference maker, and you didn't see it. And you got to credit Ohio State's defense too for stopping him because that front seven. I mean, I talked about it in the preview. I was like that interior defensive line, like they don't play great. Like you could see some push here from Notre Dame, especially if you get Jagasaw back and Rocco Spindler back and guys that can get push up front. You could see maybe an edge for Notre Dame on that the first drive. You saw a little bit more success with Riley Leonard running the football and him actually throwing the ball well too. Um, but you got to give them a ton of credit, like you said, how they responded, how they played, they were up to the task, and also like playing complementary football too. Like that's exactly what it looks like to force your opponent to play things that they do not want to have to play. And Ohio State did it, and they ended up winning. And yeah, it was crazy though. But like watching that game, it was just like all of a sudden Notre Dame scores right. They score that first touch, the second touchdown really gets to make it 15 um, to I think 31. And you're like, well, a lot of things need to happen here, but they're still technically in it. And then all of a sudden, Ohio State's driving and they get the fumble, and Notre Dame goes down, and I think they miss a field goal. But oh yeah, I want to ask you that too. Not to like change directions here, but that field goal call, I at the time I was like no, but in hindsight,
dude, your fourth down conversion rate for Notre Dame and your third and long conversion rate is terrible, right? So if you're gonna play the analytics game, you want to play like, okay, you only have you're making a two possession game. That's normally my argument, right? But also the reality is it's a two possession game, 16 points, right? It might be a two possession game if you convert both 2 point conversions, right? It like my thought there, like you have a fourth down and goal at the 12, and you have, by the way, like almost 10 minutes left in the game with all of your timeouts. Yeah, you were going to need two stops. You were going to need two stops anyways, right? Like whether you kick the field goal or go for it, right? Like regardless, you were going to need two stops. I was okay with it, honestly. Mitch Jeter had been really good in the postseason. People are going to disagree with that. Be like, but the analytics, it's like, well, actually, the analytics would probably tell you to probably kick the field goal there. Honestly, like if I don't have the numbers in front of me, right, but based on their third and fourth down success rate on third and long and fourth and long, and based on Ohio State's defensive red zone, like the analytics probably, if I had to guess, and this sounds surprising, it, I'm okay with kicking the field goal right there. And they have an analytics guy, by the way, like they do. Notre Dame does, and he's pretty good, and he's a young guy. So I would imagine either Marcus Freeman didn't listen to him, or he did listen to him, like he has been all season, like he did early in the game to go for it on 4th and 1, like early in the game with Riley Leonard running the ball there and converting. I didn't have a big problem with it, and I didn't have a problem with it watching it live. And then I go on Twitter and I see people just
Yeah.
exploding about it, and I'm like, I guess I see the withdrawal. It is a championship game, right? But I think like regardless if it's a championship game or not, I think you just have to make the decision that is most conducive to you winning the football game. And I think that kicking the field goal in that situation actually was. But I don't know. Comment section can rip me up to shreds, but it's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, you also have to factor in like, yes, it was a two-score game, but you still needed a touchdown on a 4th and 9, right? After
Yes.
you had two straight incomplete passes, and then also a 2-point conversion. Because at that point too, where you get a touchdown, you go for it, you get a touchdown, great. But if you don't get the 2-point conversion, it's essentially the same thing as kicking the field goal, right? So it's not like a totally different, outcome there. I personally would have gone for it, and that's probably not why I get paid millions of dollars to coach this team, because I see it in hindsight. Like, yeah, it actually would have worked out. And two, like you said, you were going to have to make stops anyways, and you needed to rely upon your defense to come out and make stops. And after that missed field goal, credit that defense. Boom, they forced a punt, which was maybe one of the only punt of the game for Ohio State. And then you went down and scored in plenty of time, and you had a chance on 3rd and 9 or whatever, 3rd and 11. And Will Howard makes a great pass, and Jeremiah Smith, runs a hell of a route, and they just left Christian Gray out there to just absolutely, get torched, which he kind of didn't have a great game. We
No,
talked
he
about
did
that in
not.
the beginning. We were like, yeah, against USC when they played a lot of man, and he's playing against very good wide receivers, he got torched in that game. I thought Leonard Moore actually played pretty well,
Leonard
but
Moore is awesome, by the way. Like I've been able to watch him, most of the season, but I think I really appreciated him in this game. Like he was shut down, and he was deservingly so. Freshman All American,
yeah,
right? All of the whatnots. 3-star guy out of Texas. Ridiculous. I thought. I think he's big, right? 6'2", like 190 pounds. I, People don't talk about him. I know he's got freshman All American, right? So people, I guess, do talk about him. But I think in like the national media coverage of Notre Dame, they talk about Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Riley Leonard, Jaden Greathouse, Jeremiah Love, Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison. Like I just didn't feel like they talked about Leonard more enough. He's going to be a really good football player for Notre Dame moving forward. Like really good shutdown guy, and it's crazy how they just pull like freshman lockdown cornerbacks out of their ass every single year. They're like, okay, yeah, what 3-star, 4-star freshman wants to be an absolute stud? It's unbelievable. They just do it every year. So yeah,
for real. What
unbelievable.
what do you think about the fake punt? Right, and I was like, go for it. A 4th and 2, I was like, go for it. Get Riley Leonard going downhill, but you had Angeli in the backfield, and it was open. By the way, like,
It was.
yeah, it was covered, but it was still open, and you got to make that catch or make a better throw. Either one. Um, I think you had to do it because you had just gotten shredded 4 straight possessions. You went basically 3 and out after Ohio State scored a 70-yard, basically 70-yard touchdown, whatever it was, right? Getting down to the goal line there. But
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Like you have a people are like, why are you faking a punt? Why won't you just run it with Leonard? You had success with that. I don't know, man. Like,
Good special teams coordinator, and it was there. Like
what do you?
I
What do
will
you?
take
Yeah,
a
you have a
rolling
Marty
out of
Biaggi
Steve
is a great.
Angeli
Yeah,
and
Marty
him
Biaggi is a
Jordan
great special
Faison.
teams quarter. Yeah, and it was there and just dropped it. So I didn't have a problem with it, to be honest. But I'm a I didn't have a problem with it. Like, and people, there's a lot of people on Twitter, there are a lot of people out there that like are going to blame Marcus Freeman for that. I thought he actually coached a pretty solid game. And to your point about not running the ball out with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, I mean they had 18 plays on their first possession. That was 30% of the entire plays that they ran the whole game, right? So to be honest, like there just wasn't a lot of opportunity. Like the early down success that you didn't have with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price is the reason why they didn't run a lot is because they didn't have that many more plays after that, right? Like to run on offense. They only had like 40 plays on offense after that first possession. So that kind of like led to that. But yeah, it would have been nice to get the run game established for Notre Dame. I'm sure they game planned for Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price to play well and have their openings. But yeah, I guess last thoughts. Um, so you see Ohio State having to replenish a ton of NFL talent. Where they are right now, and I know you don't have names in front of you, but vibes. You think they're able to replenish year one?
Well, like no, like I don't like this year. They were clearly the most talented team in college football, and we said that like pretty much from the beginning, right? And I think that was pretty evident too. It was like, can this coaching staff get the most out of them? How's the culture? And that turned out to be A+ all around, right? Especially in December and January. Like, it's I don't know if it'll be as drastic a drop off as we saw with Michigan in terms of like them really, really struggling on one side of the football. But again, quarterback, top two running backs, right? One of your top wide receivers, a couple offensive linemen, your whole defensive line, couple linebackers, couple guys in the secondary. Now it's a good start that you have Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, who are probably the best offensive and defensive players, in college football, which is great. You've recruited really well at all of those positions that you do need to replenish. So yeah, that'll be great. I don't know if I'll pick them to win the national title game. I don't know if I pick them to win the Big Ten. Like I think a lot has to happen. I almost feel better about Notre Dame and what they return. Right, such as
Yeah,
you're probably losing Ryan Leonard, but you're bringing a lot of guys back that are very, very good.
I'm
Right,
comfortable with their quarterback situation.
and Jelly, I know he missed that one pass, but he's fantastic. They got some young guys that they really like too, CJ Carr and others. Um, yeah, and yes, Jaden Greathouse's a guy that like I feel like I've been waiting for like 2-3 years now, right? Back when he was a freshman, waiting for him to really break out, and he was awesome, right? And obviously that defense will be good and replenished and healthy, hopefully next year. It sucks you're losing Al Golden like right away. By the way, I mean Ian Rappaport really like within minutes of that final whistle is, and the Bengals are expected to hire Al Golden. It's like, well, thanks for waiting, kind of, but that's just kind of a slap in the face for Notre Dame
And
to
you
lose.
lose
And
your
then
your best players on the interior. You lose Xavier Watts, who was your kind of your catalyst, in terms of forcing turnovers, making
yeah,
splash plays. But
it's not
yeah,
like easy guys. No, those aren't easy guys to replace. But in
no,
terms of like, you're not replacing 15 guys that are going to the NFL. Like,
no, you're not.
do
So
you think Ohio State breaks the record? I think they could, depending on who stays. And like, if some people declare
I think
early
they
as
do.
juniors,
I
I think
think
they
they
could
break.
break the record for sure.
I think they do, which is crazy. There were a lot of seniors on that team, man, that were like, "Hey, let's do it one more time." You know,
And they did it. I will say too, and this was a refreshing sight to see for Notre Dame. Like they belonged, right? And I know they made a national title game and like they beat Penn State and they beat Georgia and they beat Indiana and they beat A and so like what more do they really need to prove? But it was nice to see Notre Dame, who we've seen in the past, get in these big moments and be outclassed athletically, right? And obviously Ohio State is a little bit higher tier than Notre Dame is. They're newsflash, they're a higher tier than everybody else in college football. So it's not just Notre Dame. It was nice to see Notre Dame like belong in these games. And I think college football is better when Notre Dame is like a legit championship contender. And I think I probably said it earlier in the season. I think a lot of people probably said it. Like, I'm not going to take them seriously until like I see it, right? Like I can hear you, I can see, all the writing on the wall and all that other good stuff. But I want to see that with my eyes, and I did see it. And as for Marcus Freeman, right, we've done our coaching draft a couple times now in terms of second year coaches and third year coach redraft and all that kind of stuff. He's fantastic. And as a Bears fan, right, like when if we didn't get Ben Johnson, like my second,
Or Mike
like,
Vrabel.
or Vrabel,
I was a Vrabel guy.
To be honest, though, like hot take, I would have taken Marcus Freeman over Vrabel because, like, I just think that guy has such a bright future ahead of him, and he's already doing things at an elite level for his age and his experience at the head coaching position, and just thrust into a role as a first-time head coach at Notre Dame. Right, it took Ryan Day years to make it to a title game at Ohio State, arguably getting a much better.
Took Kirby Smart 7 years to get to a national title or to win a national.
One. Yeah,
it took Ryan Day 7 years to win one.
Exactly, and Nick Saban took him a lot longer than that as a head coach. So yeah, I think it's awesome. I think Notre Dame's here to stay. I think they're recruiting well. I think they're going to be able to start leveraging things, and the way that some revenue sharing is going to be coming down. Like they're not going anywhere, right? And I think Marcus Freeman, like Brian Kelly left Notre Dame, right, for LSU, and how many people were really like shocked? I think a lot of us were like, yeah, that's probably a better job. It's not a worse job, right? With better talent area, you got looser restrictions in terms of the higher ups, and you're in the SEC and
academic restriction. Yeah, no academic restrictions.
Yes.
You're way better geography. You've got, I'm not gonna say more money, but
a larger alumni base, though. Notre Dame's a small school, so it doesn't produce that many alumni. Like Ohio State,
the alumni,
the largest alumni in the world, right, is Ohio State.
Yeah, so I just think it's funny. I think like
it is.
When Notre Dame beat Penn State, I was like, man, what are LSU fans thinking right now?
Because you would trade Brian Kelly for Freeman in a heartbeat. Like,
if you're Notre Dame or if you're LSU,
yeah,
absolutely. You won the SEC West with a really damn good team, all right, but you lost some games that you shouldn't have, which left you out of the playoffs. You then have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and 2 first-round wide receivers who both had over 1,000 yards in their first season in the pros, and Jaden Daniels made a Pro Bowl in his first year.
And is winning multiple playoff games.
And you do not, and not even win the national championship, not even make the playoffs, not even make the conference championship game. You went 9-3 with that talent. And he's just like, let me point fingers at Matt House.
Yeah.
Let me point the finger at him and get him fired, right? Because I got to point finger at someone. And then a year later be like, yeah, everyone's paying for players. What happened to not having the resources at Notre Dame that you wanted, right? What happened to that?
The grass is not always greener. Is not always greener.
I'm sorry, LSU fans. And I think Brian Kelly's a good coach, and I think he wins games.
Yeah,
right?
He'll be fine at LSU.
He'll be fine. They could win a national championship with him. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. They won with Ed Ogeron.
With Les Miles' players, right?
But Les Miles won one with Saban's players. So he had his chance. So fucking Brian Kelly had his chance to win one with Ed Ogeron's players, and he didn't get it done.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that there was a huge misevaluation of the talent that you had on the defensive side of the football. I still can't believe they only won 9 games with that team. That is unbelievable. Will Campbell, Emory Jones as well. You had who's the guard that's from FIU, who's pretty solid, the center. I mean, you loaded. You were loaded. And by the way, FYI, Brian Kelly, clock's ticking, all right, because Garrett Nussmeier is currently the favorite to win Heisman next year. All right, so good luck meeting expectations. Good luck meeting expectations, Brian Kelly. That's it.
Last thing on this game here. So I think in terms of I think this makes the picture of top coaches in college football this season I think told us a lot, right? Because you had guys like Jim Harbaugh and Saban like leave, right? You're like, what do I do with Dabo? Like, who is at the top? You have Kalen DeBoer coming in, but you're like, how is he going to be at Alabama? Blah blah blah. A lot of movement. Lincoln Riley on a prove it year. Brian Kelly on like all these guys, right? I think to me, and you can pick your order, but this is mine, right? I think it has to be Kirby Smart one because he's won 2 titles, right? And he's
Yep.
sustained success for a while. I think Ryan Day number 2 because he won a title and he has sustained success for a long time. And Marcus Freeman is probably moved into my top 3.
Whoa. I'll
And
slow you
okay,
down there.
I'll take it back. These are coaches that I would want leading my program. There's that.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
that. In
if
terms
you're
of like what
investing, if you're investing in someone to build a program and sustain success and establish a culture, yeah, he's up there. I don't know if I put him in my top 3 yet because
so
you still
James Franklin.
he still has this epidemic of losing games against really bad teams
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and not being prepared. And that's the thing. But if you're investing in him, right,
It's
that'll come.
inexperience. Yeah.
That's an experience. Like that'll come, right? So I guess if you're looking at if you're going to buy stock in a coach, right, you're going to obviously buy Kirby Smart, right, because he's paying dividends out the wazoo and his stock continues to go up always. Ryan Day is paying great dividends. Marcus Freeman, you know, had a big spike this year, in his stock price, but it's pretty volatile, right? But I think, it's the early stages of his company. He'll start. I don't hate that from you. I think
I
as
guess
like
it is
from
a
a
little
pure coach,
overreaction.
I don't know that's I because he also doesn't have like top 3 recruiting classes, or top 5 like his good recruiting classes. I'd probably put like Sark and Dan Lanning maybe like over him, but Dan Lanning's even
But
interesting.
again,
Kalen
like
DeBoer maybe
what
as a
like
coach.
Dan Lanning and Sark, like they have not won big time games. And like they've gotten embarrassed in big time games before, right? Like I I don't know. I guess it's probably an overreaction, but I just want to kind of be like Notre Dame. You've got a guy, and you got to do what it can to keep him stay there. Right? Not that he'll leave, but keep him there, and also like continue to invest in him because like I think it's not crazy to say that Notre Dame. I feel confident saying if Marcus Freeman's there for the next decade or so, I feel like Notre Dame is either going to win a title or be back in the spot here at least a couple times, at least maybe once or twice. And in the 12-team playoff, 14, whatever it's going to be, like you don't know what it's going to be. But I also think Notre Dame's set up too to succeed uniquely. Like I, with the way that their conference kind of is, that like they're in the ACC, but they don't get the ACC knock that other ACC teams get, right? Because they're Notre Dame and they do play some out of conference games, but they also like compete and play well in them too. Like they beat USC, right? They beat Texas A&M, right? An SEC team, and I don't
And they'll
know.
play him again next year, but at home.
It'll be in South Bend, so it's interesting. I don't know. I that probably isn't a reaction. I kind of forgot about those guys, but I,
But I see what
well,
you're saying though. I see what you're saying.
it's an
Like
early resume.
people that invested in Marcus Freeman stock, quote unquote. Yeah, it could go to the moon here pretty soon.
Yeah, no, I guess that was kind of it, but it's
Because this isn't like Sonny Dykes, where like Sonny Dykes just went to the transfer portal and somehow
just nailed it.
that was a miracle. I still don't
It
understand
was
how that
also
happened.
a unique situation where you played in a conference where again Texas and Oklahoma were down, right? Because that was the first year of that was like that was the first year of Brent Venables, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was. They went 6-6 that year,
Yeah, and then yeah,
or
because that
six
was
and
the year.
seven, I should
Yeah,
say.
exactly. And then you also had that was year 2 of Sark where he was still building up to it.
He went 8-4 that year.
Yeah, and then also like the rest of college football was down, and you got in a spot where you played Michigan
Two pick
because
sixes.
you had 2 pick 6s, and you also like that Michigan team was still learning how to win, and also you were in that spot because they didn't want Ohio State and Michigan to replay each other again in that first round. So Ohio State had to play Georgia. So you had the easier of the matchups, and you got to win. And yeah, to me this it's not a fluke at all that Notre Dame's in the spot. I don't think. And yes, you hit on your transfer portal quarterback, but he also wasn't like great all year.
No.
And like he played really well down the stretch. And again, he's a guy that I don't know how he doesn't have more eligibility. I don't know why I thought he was only 3 years, but I guess he did play. Oh damn! In 2021,
I don't know if he can get a medical red shirt. He might be able to. I don't know.
I'm sure. Yeah, but he would be awesome to play another year of college football. But um,
Just a winner.
he is.